Do you build walls around yourself? Do you find yourself closed off, unable to build genuine connections with those around you? If you tend to take the avoidant approach in your relationships, stay tuned because this is what we're going to delve into today. So this question came from my community. The person was wondering what's holding them back from opening up. So I thought I'd address it here because it's something that I believe that we all can relate to at some point or another. And first, before I can fully answer the question, I have a lot more questions because every situation is different. So I'll do my best to provide a general response. This is something I definitely struggled in the first half of my life. And sometimes it peeks its head and I have to be like, okay, friend, check yourself. But I grew up in a highly critical environment with caregivers that were emotionally unavailable. They didn't show their emotions. They weren't very affectionate. And I grew up in a Caribbean household. This wasn't something that we did. Their way of taking care of you was feeding you and clothing you and providing a roof over your head. So I totally get this, if this is something that you are currently struggling with. So if this is you, keep watching because I promise you, this is something that you can move past. This is something that you can actually learn. At first, it's going to feel quite scary. Part of the reason why it feels scary is because we haven't learned how to regulate a lot of our emotions. But if you allow yourself to open up and you're able to cross over to the other side, it is pure magic. It is an aliveness. I can't explain with words, but you can really feel yourself come alive when you are vulnerable with others. Susan David said that discomfort is the price of admission for a meaningful life. I always share this quote because it just makes sense in so many different ways. But let's get right into it. Emotions are a natural part of human nature, but it can be difficult to manage. As I mentioned earlier, learning to share our emotional world with others is a skill that we can definitely learn. And I really want that for you because it just brings so much color into our lives. So we live in a world where emotions tend to be considered as private matters, which should be kept under wraps at all costs. It's no wonder that emotional intelligence and emotional stability is still considered some sort of elusive skill. We don't want to admit that we have feelings that could actually get hurt or that we could actually hurt someone else. But this is the price of life. It's something that you cannot avoid doing, but it's something that you can manage. When it comes to building social relationships, emotions are a double-edged sword. They are essential for our well-being and an integral part of our relationships with others. However, they can make it really difficult for us to communicate openly with others and share our inner worlds with those that we love and care about, especially if we've been violated, emotionally deprived, or hurt in some way. And we see that over time, these emotions, if they're not expressed, if they're blocked, they turn into disease in our bodies. So if you're feeling blocked in this area, there is a place to start. My question to you is, have you done inner child work? Inner child work is the key that unlocks everything. Every time I'm with a client, it goes back to inner child work, and we have to do some work around there in order for them to progress and move forward. The reason why this is so important, because this is how we learned to communicate. This is where we learn what was right, what was wrong. This is where we witness relationships in real time, how people were interacting with each other, what they were saying, how they were saying it. And if we grew up in chaotic or emotionally unavailable households, then this is what we absorbed. Some of you might have developed protective factors or certain coping mechanisms, especially defense mechanisms, to help make you feel safe, to help soothe you, to help regulate your emotions. And I noticed that we often carry emotional baggage from generations to generations, and we learn from what we saw in our environment. So it's all not completely your fault. It's something that you learn and it becomes a habit, but it is your responsibility to make those shifts moving forward. So I'll give you an example, just a really simple example. Maybe you witnessed your mom really wearing her heart on her sleeve, really getting into situations where she jeopardized her heart and it was broken all of the time and she got hurt all of the time. And for us growing up in households like that, where we witnessed a lack of boundaries, there are two roads that we can go, two extremes, I call them. One road, we can become just like that mom, where we have no emotional boundaries whatsoever, and we're sort of flailing and at the mercy of other folks. And then there's another approach where you can have extremely rigid boundaries. And sometimes I call them boundary bubbles. And I talk more about boundary bubbles in my inner child course, from which you can find a link in the description below, a crash course to inner child. Definitely check it out. It's going to be life-changing for you. So you see how you can go on opposite sides of the spectrum. And the goal here is to find balance. And the goal here is to create the boundaries and to recognize what those boundaries are through inner child work. That's a whole other process, but it's something that is available for you, because often we believe or think that there's no way out of this stuff. And there really is. There is a roadmap. The truth is, we usually weren't taught how to manage our emotions. More often than not, there wasn't a space for us to have really big feelings. Now you might find yourself in a relationship where you have to be vulnerable. And since relationships are mirrors, they are great roadmaps to finding out the things that we need to heal. So I love relationships for that. One of my most toxic relationships was what liberated me and helped me to see all of the things that I needed to heal. It was hard to accept and humbling. But without that relationship, I would have not known that there was a light at the end of the tunnel, that I could be something else, something different than what I was accustomed to. And so when you're having a hard time opening up to others or feeling like you're blocked, and you might not feel comfortable expressing yourself because you lack the language and the articulation to communicate what's going on with you deep down inside. But when you begin to do inner child work, this leads to much needed clarity. A second block that you might be experiencing could be around shame. You might feel shameful about certain feelings or emotions or experiences that you've had because they represent previous difficulties in your life or previous failures or points of contention. This will come up later in your relationships, especially if you felt rejected or ignored as a child. A question to ask yourself is, what story have you created about your emotions, about vulnerability? Dissect that story and ask yourself where it came from, when it first appeared, and how it protected you all of this time. In what way has it been a protective shell, a protective factor in your life? Because it has served you, right? Especially when you're in chaotic household, these protective barriers served you so well. They helped you to survive such really tough conditions. So we want to thank them for that. They're just not going to lead you to where you want to be, and they no longer serve you. So that points me to my next question, which is, do you still need it? That story, those protective barriers. Does the story still serve you in this season of your life? Lastly, ask yourself, what are you genuinely afraid of? I did an incredible video about what you're afraid of, about fear, that I'll leave at the end of this video that you can check out. It's really powerful. It's going to help you dive deep into your fears and get you started if fear is definitely a factor in your life. Next, you want to explore where shame comes from. When did this first appear? And question why you're still holding on to it. We often hold on to shame because we believe, we have this misbelief that we are inherently flawed to our core, which is 100% false. That is an illusion. Shame can also be used as an excuse to push people away, because shame likes to remain hidden behind the shadows. And when shame is illuminated, people can truly see us for who we are. And that can be very scary and uncomfortable for a lot of us, especially if we haven't accepted ourselves. The things that happen in your life, they do not define who you are, but you do need to shine a light on them, and that's called shadow work. Remember that whatever you keep hidden, that you refuse to acknowledge, will continue to grow and strengthen. However, when they come into the light, they weaken. I love emotions because emotions are just feedback. Without them, we lose our internal guidance system. Allow yourself to settle into your emotions and feel what it's trying to tell you. Here's something to be mindful about emotions. Emotions have been described as energy in motion, like a wave moving through all aspects of our bodies. You know, if you ever felt your heart race when you get excited about something, or maybe your stomach churn when you get nervous about something like, giving a speech or something, then you know what I mean by this metaphor. Emotions are energy in movement. So this is why I said earlier that if they're blocked, they turn into disease. So we have to move those emotions through. We have to process them. We have to move them through. Emotions are normal reactions to life events. That's why they exist. They help us navigate through life by helping us decide what we should do next. If your emotions are locked in the past, then your decisions moving forward will also keep you locked in the past, because you're moving from outdated beliefs and outdated emotions. I always tell my clients to just get curious about their emotions without any judgment. Just be like, what's going on here? I'm curious to see what this is. Because emotions are just trying to get your attention to something that needs to be nurtured. So if you're in a situation where you feel like you're pushing people away over time, that doesn't hurt the other person. That person, you ever notice, people just kind of move on. You're still having a meltdown somewhere. It hurts you in the long run. It may feel like a relief in the moment because, I don't have to experience or talk about that thing or have that tough conversation. I don't have to get hurt. It might feel a relief. And this has everything to do with your nervous system, the nervous system that wants to fight, flight, or freeze. I always say, typically we view our world through two lenses, through our nervous system and through our inner child. When those are working, they usually work in tandem and they sort of dictate how we see the world and how we interact with people. So it's really important that we get clear what's going on in our nervous systems and if we're coming from that hurt inner child place. I love emotions because this is a beautiful opportunity to train yourself to remain still in difficult situations. And sometimes you just have to build up to it, because if 20 minutes sitting still is very difficult, try just a minute to not react. Try 2 minutes, 3 minutes to remain still and process what's going on. Because what you're doing is you're actually building your resilience. You're building your resilience to the big feelings that you have inside. If you don't proactively manage your emotions, then the emotions will manage you. Do not become enslaved by your emotions or your mind. You must face what you're feeling slowly, with tenderness, with self-forgiveness, grace, and self-compassion. The most common ways that people deal with negative emotions are by, obviously, like I said, pushing people away or pushing their feelings away, or by numbing themselves. Pushing away involves withdrawing from other people and avoiding situations that might actually trigger that emotion. So we live our lives just in complete avoidance. Numbing may involve distractions, even as highly destructive as substance use or compulsive behaviors or other addictions like emotional eating. That was me, emotional eater here. So when you're feeling blocked, one of the suggestions I give my clients is that when you're feeling blocked or when you're feeling like your emotions are taking over, just take a second, breathe. Your breath is so important, provides such a beautiful anchor. Is to put a hand like this on your heart and just cross it over and just ask yourself, what do I need right now? And sometimes you're talking to your inner child, what do you need right now? Do you need to feel seen? Do you need to feel heard? Do you need to take a break? What do you need? And you could ask yourself, what is it that I need? And just pause and remain in that stillness. A lot of emotional reactivity, and when we shut down a lot, comes from our inner child. Our inner child is coming out to protect us. And so what happens is that these coping mechanisms, these defenses are frozen in time. So this is your opportunity to find positive ways to self-soothe and to manage what you're experiencing and what you're feeling. Before I wrap up this video, I want to name a few things, and that's self-disclosure. Self-disclosure, or also known as being vulnerable, is fundamental in relationships. It's how you communicate your thoughts, your feelings, and emotions to other people. A good example of self-disclosure is when we tell our partner about a problem that happened at work or life, and we just share that with them. We're sharing our inner world with those around us. We bring them in and we build trust. Brené Brown has a beautiful example of this, and I love using it because it provides a nice visual. She says that trust is like marbles in a jar. So imagine you having a jar of marbles, clear glass jar. And when someone does something that allows you to trust them, you put a marble in a jar. And you keep doing that. Each time they do something, you put a marble in a jar. And then maybe, because we're human, right? Maybe they do something that breaks that trust. So you take a marble out of the jar. And then you talk it out, you process it, you come to an understanding. The contrast here with folks who have a lot of trust issues is that if somebody takes away our trust, breaks our trust, we tend to want to throw the entire jar out and then start all over again, or start in ways that we're like 10 steps behind. So it's really a dance that we do, remembering that we don't have to throw the entire jar away. If you find yourself avoiding self-disclosure, putting on a mask, pretending that things are okay when they're not, it'll be very difficult for you to build intimate relationships with other people. You might avoid doing this for many reasons. As I mentioned before, you don't know how to express yourself clearly. You don't have the words or the articulation to do so. You're afraid of rejection. A lot of us are. You have been hurt before by loved ones or even strangers. Your beliefs prevent you from being vulnerable. So, what are your belief systems? You're afraid of being judged by other people. You feel unworthy or inferior compared to others. You're afraid that people will think that you're crazy, intense, or too much because you have really strong and intense emotions. I want you to remember that self disclosure is connection. Obviously, you have to use your discernment to decide who you can self disclose to. Emotions and vulnerability, those are all connections, and we need that as humans, as flesh. For that connection to take place, you must first be connected with yourself. How does your emotional body feel when you experience difficult situations? In which ways can you soften your emotional body if it feels tense, scared, anxious, or frozen? How do you self soothe? How do you let your body know that it's safe? You must practice these emotions with yourself first. You must practice feeling safe in your own body first before you connect with the outside world. So I can talk about emotions all day long. So let's for real wrap this up. The things that are holding you back aren't out there. It's all in here, in your heart. The unresolved emotions that need to be resolved, that's inner child work. The pain that needs to be processed, the love that needs to be given to yourself, that's where you start. Achieving balance in your relationships requires you to understand how they work, how they affect you and those around you. Emotions are just signals that alert you to something happening in your life that needs your attention and nurturance. They are messengers that tell you if you're feeling safe or threatened, if you're feeling loved or rejected, or if your needs are being met or ignored. So pay attention to them. They also can provide an outlet for your innermost feelings and desires without always having to use words. Remember that when you came into this physical realm, to this world, you were already loved. You were already whole because you are spirit. That is you. That is who you really are. So I encourage you to just dig deep into your emotions, get curious without judgment, with grace, without guilt or shame. Give them space to breathe. Give them space to be free. Let me know in the comments below which part of this video resonated with you the most, and let me know how you manage opening up or vulnerability or any of the things and topics that we talked about. And definitely share this, subscribe, check out the Inner Child course. It's a beautiful way to start the process of opening up, and I will see you on the other side of change. Thank you for watching.